Hello, everyone. My name is Fernando Valenzuela from EDT Partners, and I want to welcome all of you, hoping, first of all, that everyone is safe during these difficult times. I think COVID-19 has changed our lives in a way that we are only just beginning to understand. So we are living in an environment that we haven't experienced before. We are learning day by day, assimilating data that emerges from this new world and connecting patterns that arise from reflecting on relevant questions. We are seeing signs that are recognizing the challenges ahead, and at EDT Partners, we have identified a diverse and broad perspective on the patterns that affect the future of assessment. So I am very, very happy to introduce good friends and recognized leaders in the education space. I'm going to start with Yvonne Gonzalez from Universidad de La Sabana in Colombia, a nonprofit private institution of higher education that is basically has a beautiful campus close to Bogota. Then Carlos Iván González from Universidad de Guadalajara in Mexico, a public university with about 120,000 students. And Learnosity from Gavin Cooney, an energetic and enthusiastic evangelist that has created better learning experience for learners everywhere, developing an API-based assessment engine. So this is the group of panelists that we are going to be discussing under a format of 3 basic stages. We have designed this with first talk about assessment problems that were already identified before COVID, then how it impacted us in the assessment space, and then a post-COVID view of what it means. So we are basically going to see how technology and evidence gathering during the course of learning eventually will displace the need for this old view of exams. So I'm gonna start the panel by introducing Carlos Iván from Universidad Guadalajara to kick us off and basically introduce this first discussion, the first stage. What were the problems that you were identifying before COVID? Thank you and welcome, Carlos.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation, Fernando, and my partners in the panel. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Because I cannot hear my voice, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead. Okay. Well, I want to thank EDTalks for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I wanted to address three main points on this first participation. One is in this pandemic, one tend to think that there are new problems. And in reality, this type of crisis, they do not create new problems. What they do is make the current problems more pressing, more urgent, but they're usually the same ones. So what was higher education? Where was higher education heading in the world pre-COVID-19? Where were we? And there are three trends that were happening just before, and many literature around them was flowing across the world. One is that higher education was going to an omni-channel path. I mean, using different technologies, different devices to transmit information and to get knowledge. The second trend is higher education was moving towards modular learning. Pieces of information, pieces of short programs, microcredit, micro-credentials were becoming a trend in many universities. And the third one is lifelong learning. We were moving towards understanding that higher education must be long life. I mean, not short periods of time, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then going back to work and then coming back for a PhD or any other course. So that was happening before. The good news, or the news, is that these three trends are the same right now, but they're much more pressing. We need to move faster. We need to be more audacious in developing omnichannel and lifelong learning in higher education. And finally, at this initial participation, there was a very interesting study by IBM, a think tank by IBM, that identified the most important 5 traits, skills, characteristics in the labor force, but also as a citizen in 1918. 1, willingness to be flexible, agile, and adaptable to change. 2, time management, stress management, and the ability to prioritize. 3rd, ability to work effectively in team environments. And 4th, the ability to communicate effectively in business context. This was 1918. My hypothesis is that in 2020, post-COVID-19, we have the same 4 skills, traits, but now they are much more time sensitive. We need to move faster. And perhaps I will move time and stress management at the top right now, because we need to be much more adaptable to change and to manage our own schedule and to manage our own stress in the labor market and as citizens and human beings in general. So the challenge is assess this, how to teach this, because they're soft skills. It's very difficult to do that. How to do it. And that's what this discussion will be about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carlos. So just to understand, I mean, tests should be viewed as a vital part of the overall learning cycle. And typically, coping mechanisms that students are facing emotionally, with frequent interactions, they reduce the threat of testing. How do you see that in Colombia, Yvonne, at the Language Institute and your students?
Hi, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Nice panel, and I really enjoy being part of it. Let me share my screen. Give me a sec. There we go. Let me know if you can see it, please. Okay. So, pre-COVID. So what was the discussion around assessment before COVID? So all the teachers and academics were discussing about when, what, and how to assess, and how assessment should be used in education. So the discussion was a lot about before, during, and after, so summative, formative, diagnostic assessment. And it was to focus on the understanding of students and the proficiency they could get of what they were learning. And they were too concerned about what type of assessment should be made, if they were going to use it online or face-to-face, etc. So, academics, sometimes they take too much time because they need to first try out, they need to do some research to get some data and then to implement. But at least there was this awareness of the purpose of assessment. So data came to the discussion, and it was for sure that it was very helpful to guide students on the learning path. And the other thing was how to decide what type of assessment to implement. Was it for learning or of learning? Good. So I agree with what Carlos Ivan just said. Lifelong learning was in the discussion, and personalized learning, and modular learning, credentialing, and digital badges, etc. But new things came to the discussion like predictive analytics and the artificial intelligence. So at least there was this new awareness of what was going on in the educational world. And what we saw before COVID is that assessment was seen as more informative and not as punishment. So it was like the big change to make students think of what they could do instead of what was their grade. So assessment was bring to this equation, bringing benefit to the students to guide their learning process and not to be punitive. So the big questions by that time was how to implement those new things like artificial intelligence, the use of data and analytics, and what should be graded and what shouldn't be graded. So that was the stage of assessment in education before COVID.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. We're going to close now with Gavin. So assessment practices tended to focus on what students knew. They were assessed above all on their understanding of some domain-specific knowledge. But the idea of as a single test acting as the touch point of evaluation seemed out of place even before COVID. How do you see that, Gavin?
So look, by way of introduction, my name is Gavin Cooney. I'm the founder and CEO of Learnosity. So what Learnosity is an assessment company, and we are powering other people's assessment products, and powering assessments for universities and governments and so on. So what we've done is we provide a bunch of tools that people can use to build assessment products in that. And in the last year, we've delivered about 1.8 billion, that's billion with a B, questions. We've about 15 million active users every month. And what we're trying to do is raise the bar for what is possible when it comes to assessment. We don't care so much about what you use assessment for, why you're doing assessment, and so on. What we're trying to do is we're trying to enable that Vaughn and Carlos are outlining here. So we're trying to make them possible. It should never be, it should be driven by teachers. It should be driven by the people in charge of pedagogy, not by technology people. So what we're doing is we're raising the bar. We're enabling certain things to be possible that were not possible before. That includes, we've broadened the question types. So we're introducing stuff like audio and video, file upload, auto scoring mathematics, that kind of thing, drag and drop, drawing, that kind of thing. And we're doing things like better authoring and teacher authoring, making that simple, and some analytics, getting that data out so that the teachers and the learning designers and so on can use that data as it comes through. So that's kind of what we're doing. And we feel that if we can build better technology and we can push the whole industry forward, we can the whole industry rises with the tide of the innovation of what we do. And now it's becoming, of course, we're going to talk about how it's been during COVID and what we see for the future. But for the last few years, we've been trying to raise that bar and that common set of scalable, accessible infrastructure that people can build on. It's so important.
Thank you so much, Gavin. So we're going to change gears and begin kind of assessing what happened after COVID hit us. And basically, this worldwide period of emergency that made us all move into remote teaching, remote education. So we're going to start back with Yvonne from Universidad Sabana in Colombia to see how was the reaction and what are the things that you embraced while we were impacted by COVID.
Yeah, I mean, COVID changed things radically. And what happened was that we had this urgency of making changes in assessment, and not only the type of assessment, but when and how to assess. Let me try to share some slides with you. I need to unshare. Let me see, it is not working. Oh, well, let me see. There you go. Let me know if you can see that. Okay, can you see the slide now? Okay, good. So the impact of assessment is what I told you, this big change that all the faculty and all the teachers and instructors had to implement really fast. So ongoing assessment came to the front line. So it was sure that it has to be done all the time, not only to check what students were learning, but to guide instructors on how to plan the classes to really be effective and how to help students achieve mastery before moving to more complicated things or knowledge. And this was another change, the how to assess, because we were too used to exams based assessment. And now, as people are not in our classrooms, we have to use tasks, to make them show what they can do with the knowledge they have gained and not just the knowledge by itself. So projects came to the education world and collaborative work. And of course, it had to be online because we don't have face to face instruction right now. So, what is being assessed during COVID? Progression, understanding, readiness, and of course, the learning process. So, the big questions now are what EdTech tools to buy, how to implement them fast, and fast is the famous word now, and how to train the educators to use them fast, because we don't have weeks, we don't have months to learn how to use them. We just have 1 or 2 days. So there was this change from just awareness and discussion about the importance of assessment to really understanding how important it is in the process of education and the urgency to use assessment to improve students' learning. So, what are we doing right now during COVID? So, we are using assessment to measure the effectiveness of teaching. Why? Because everybody is looking at the education and the institutions to see if they can deal with this new way of teaching and if it is working. We we are using assessment to measure students' performance, but linked to specific learning objectives. And of course, if they are meeting the objective of the courses that they are taking. So assessment changed from that previous awareness stage to this one of using it to really have the evidence of meaningful learning of our students. So what are the challenges? The challenges are how to continue teaching in this new way of having students with us remotely, and how to enhance the learning experience. This is like the big issue now. We need to enhance the learning experience. Why? Because institutions are really, really worried about desertion, the retention strategies, and new enrollments. So this urgent need of changing of assessment came to our lives now. Fernando, we couldn't hear you. You were on mute.
Oh, I don't know what happened. So, sorry, Gavin. So I was saying that it's now common for a group of classmates to be pursuing widely different activities given their own home context, and everything is more interdisciplinary. So it is now possible not to only easily integrate interactive tests with relevant learning materials, but to make it readily available for students to practice on their own terms. Gavin, what did you see on the global scale? Which companies responded well to these challenges?
Great. So look, I'm going to bring you through a few different examples here, and I'm not going to name any people. I think that's not appropriate. But I'm going to show you some graphs of what is available. And while Paul brings that up, I'm going to talk about a few things. So here's a couple of. I'm going to show you a graph of a couple of customers here of mine. Now, one. So let me explain the graph first. I've averaged the first 8 weeks of 2020. That x-axis is the number of weeks in 2020. So January and February, that average, that's 0%. That's the average traffic in that first couple of months. And the red line is a major brand in the United States, and they are building up towards some end of year examinations, and they're working away January and February, some peaks, but basically at the same level. Now schools start closing around week 10 or 11. So no schools are closed at week 10. That's somewhere in early March. And as schools close, half of the schools are closed at week 12. 99% of schools close at week 13. And as schools close, the traffic starts ramping up. So this is because we're thinking about these are kids who are using it from home. It's generally a digitally native product. They are building up towards an examination that's happening, and the examination was not cancelled. So as we would expect in any year and every year, there's a nice ramp up in the weeks running up towards the examination. And we ended up about an increase of 200%. So 3 times the traffic coming up towards those exams. Those exams will be around now, and the traffic will go off to 0 sometime in July or the end of June. So that's what we're expecting. Now, and that's good. That's a company that was well set up to deliver during COVID era for those reasons I outlined. Digital first, an exam that was still happening, kids using it from home, and generally in this case it was kids who would study well, have chosen to do this exam, are not struggling in the homes for technology and so on. Now look at the blue line. The blue line was a traditional assessment company that's kind of interim, benchmark, summative, delivered in centers and in classrooms. And as you would expect now, because it's a K-12 company, there's not really much going on. Look at the first 8 weeks, not really much going on in January and February. There's a little bit of dip around the end of January because nobody's really assessing. You've got the regular amount of traffic coming into middle of February and so on. And what they do then is they basically try to get a bunch of assessments done towards the end of February as COVID kicks in. But as schools start closing, their business just is completely gone. The infrastructure is not there. They're delivering it from, they can't deliver from home. It is designed to be an assessment that's supervised. And this is what we're up against, okay? So as COVID happens, we're up against this type of old-fashioned assessment. Even though it's done online, it's done in a supervised way. It is not possible anymore, and the number of assessments just goes to 0. So these are just 2 things I wanted to show you to explain the graphs. And now I'll show you a few of what we've seen in the market. Here are a few of the customers of ours who have done extremely well. So again, they're going along with normal peaks and troughs for the first 2 months, and they have all taken off. They're all up 100% or even up 350 to 400% over that period. Since COVID kicked in, those numbers went way, way up. And these were all, again, products that can be used from home, digital first, generally formative, and stuff sometimes that would be used maybe by a teacher once a week or a few times a month or something. And now every bit of homework has been done. The traffic has just skyrocketed in those products. And it's beautiful to see. But there's a certain type of products that are massively heavily impacted. So here again, you have a bunch of products. They're going along around that kind of regular 0%, no change, beginning peaks and troughs, the first January and February period. And then ultimately, as schools closed, they completely got obliterated. The purple one was a company who made an extra effort to get a bunch of assessments done before schools closed. And it's fantastic to see that, but their lines went way up to 350%, a bit more, and went down to basically to zero. And that's again what we're up against. So as we talk about the impact of COVID on assessments, I'm going to give you 4 examples from the real world. First example is a university in Australia, and they called up around the start of February when Australia banned Chinese students from entering the country. They called up in a panic looking for an assessment solution. They had a kind of a war room going. They had a bunch of people working on it, and they selected a system within about a week, and they implemented it, and they were able to do their assessments. And that was to stop, to enable kids who were in China, who would have normally flown in for exams, to do them remotely. And it was a success. They were to do that because they kind of acted quickly while Sydney was unaffected, and they moved exams online. Second example I'm going to give is College Board in the United States. They have an assessment called the AP exam, Advanced Placement Exam. They adapted, and they moved this from a 3-hour written examination that's done in centers, supervised, and so on, to a 40-minute, 2-question constructed essay question done online and done in the home. They did it twice with 2 windows. So you could do it once, and if it failed, if there's some sort of problem with the technology, you could do it again. And they got the information out very, very quickly. There's a Reddit, which is quite amusing to read, called AP Students. And you can go on and you can see how all the students reacted. They got the information out, they got the technology working, and they delivered those assessments. They delivered some in the last few weeks, and they're delivering the second round around now. And fantastic to see how well that they've adapted. It's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it's by far the best thing they could do in the situation. Now I'm going to contrast that with what and these are customers. I'm not talking about customers here. This is the Irish government. So for 50 years or 70 years or something, we've had the leading cert in Ireland. So every kid in Ireland, you can drop the graph, by the way. Every kid in Ireland does this end of school examination to get into university. And that is a massively important exam. It's the only way you can get into university. But it's done in a supervised way in June, 3-hour written examinations. And when things closed down, the Irish government were unable to make the changes necessary. So they weren't able to get kids to do it in the homes. There was going to be equity problems with access to technology and broadband. They weren't able to make the concessions that we thought that maybe College Board made, moving it from a 3-hour exam to a 40-minute exam. They weren't able to do that. It's been abandoned. And I kid you not, they just said, teachers, tell us what they would have got. So teachers are now picking a grade for their students, trying to put them on a curve, trying to put schools on a curve. It's never been done before. It wasn't as if half of the grade was always done by formative assessment or by teachers picking grades or anything else, or it was always just the examination, nothing else. So it's a massively politically dangerous area now for this. And just very briefly, the very last one is a project we did in Egypt. For the last 2 or 3 years, we've been doing school-based examinations online in Egypt, supervised and so on. They just moved them online. And for the last 18 days, up until the middle of last week, we delivered, I think it was 9 million assessments. So it was 500,000 assessments every morning at 9 a.m., where basically every kid of a certain age in Egypt does their assessments. It has its problems. There's going to be WhatsApp groups with cheating. There's going to be things going on, but they moved quickly and they got everybody to do it online. So that's my spiel about what it's been like delivering assessments at a large scale during COVID and all the changes that have been happening.
Thank you so much, Gavin. This is really impressive to reflect on. So some are doing great, and I see that assessment threatens to be an exercise in measuring what is easy in the format that was known rather than a process of improving what we really care about. So, Carlos, just to close the second block, what are your reflections in terms of what we've shown of the impact of COVID so far from your perspective?
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm going to say maybe something unpopular, but in this panel, but in the University of Guadalajara, and I believe in many public universities in Mexico, assessment was not one of our main concerns when entering this COVID world. And I'm going to try to explain why. The first concern as a major public massive university of almost 300,000 students of many socioeconomic backgrounds, our main concern was equity and access and how to really keep flying the plane without crashing with this abrupt transition. And for instance, 35-40% of our students in high school, we have as many Latin American universities, we have a high school system. Almost 40% of our students, they do not have a computer at home, and they do not have access to internet. In some of our campuses in the different regions, in the region of the South, 43% of our students, they do not have a computer or a tablet, and they don't have access to internet. So our main concern was how to continue, how not to lose these students, providing lending laptops, providing them support with cards in order for them to have access, etc., etc. And the name of the game for us in terms of assessment, and by the way, this week is the first week of exams in the university, so we are in the midst of that process. The name of the game was following the recommendations of the World Bank, the OECD, UNESCO, to be flexible, to be highly sensitive of inequities in higher education. And what Yvonne says, I think is very important, to assess the semester ongoing. I mean, not to have this high stakes final test or essay, but trying to divide the whole process and trying to identify the most significant learning outcomes, which is not easy. It's very difficult. And one of the things that we are reflecting upon right now is if we perhaps have in Mexico and in Latin America very long programs, unnecessarily long programs. So we need to refocus. What is one of the lessons? We need to refocus on the main significant skills that I mentioned, for instance, at the beginning of this talk, and to focus on how to understand them, how to teach them, how to train professors, and finally, but very, very important and very difficult, how to assess them. We are working right now on a project with OECD before COVID, but it's going to be much more relevant right now, on critical thinking and creativity. But it's extremely difficult to measure emotions, perceptions, imagination, etc., etc. So I think we can learn a lot from machine learning and many other approaches of artificial intelligence and massive testing in order to address these issues. And another thing is, we were in the middle of this debate, worldwide debate, in terms of assessment of the pass-fail option. It's very controversial in many countries. We decided not to pass all the students automatically, which we don't believe in that. But we identified a middle ground, and the main decision that we communicated a couple of months ago, but we are reinforcing this week, is that no students can be left behind in terms of because of a lack of access. So it's not a universal pass, but those students that were going to fail for some reason, they have a temporary grade that can be then reassessed during a different period in order to be assessed with better conditions. And finally, when I was listening to Gavin, something came to my mind, which is very important for many macro universities, and for the University of Guadalajara is something critical. We had to push the entrance exam with College Board till August. It was going to be in May originally, but we are talking about the gathering of 50 to 60,000 students plus parents. It's a gathering of 100,000 people in different campuses. It's nonsense. It's impossible to do that, even perhaps in August. So one thing that is going to be very, very important for assessment in the future or in the present is how to deliver low-cost, secure tests online, but that they don't need to be taken in a controlled location, that can be distance taken, but that they're secure in terms of cheating and other things. I've read that there's some pilots around the world, but if someone can solve that, how to implement a test for 60,000 students in a cheap, secure, and efficient way is going to be very, very important for education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. So we're going to move a little faster to the last block, which is the implications for the new world. So the proposals that we see going forward as we move past the initial responses, including the transition to remote instruction operation. So how are we planning for the future? And Gavin, I think in recent years we have witnessed a progressive evolution of assessment processes that change the focus of attention towards strategic lifelong learning, scalable, low cost. And I think Carlos just set the ground up for you to kind of put your proposals together for the future.
Okay, so look, I think there's going to be some changes. I mean, trying to just get back to normal is a weird thing. And I think in general, the industries have tried to move just exactly what they're doing before digitally, and it doesn't quite work. Think about newspapers. If you go to my hometown newspaper right now, they haven't done a new website in 10 years, 15 years. It is literally a copy of the newspaper, and you can kind of pick up your mouse and you can kind of drag the paper over, and you can read the paper online, and that's it. They haven't done anything to modernize like more advanced newspapers have. You know, individual web pages for articles, engagement and comments and discussions, targeted advertising, that kind of stuff, and you know, and also delivering just-in-time news, not just printing it every morning or every week. So, like that, we can't just assume that we're just going to take whatever assessment we did before and just kind of digitize and it'll be this. Because again, for action, universities, especially in the United States, are spending it. They're very, very expensive things. And the value of, I don't know, going to Harvard next year or Stanford or something, you're probably going to go online. And do you want to pay 50 grand a year to go and do it? You may as well be in the Open University. You may as well be just doing some free courses online, because it's the same. It's all, there's a bunch of the experience that's going to be removed. And as we sort of transition to that remote learning, in K-12 and in higher ed, there's going to be, I believe, this kind of yo-yoing from bricks and mortar back to digital, back to bricks and mortar, because there will be additional outbreaks, there will be phase twos and so on of this virus. So we're going to have to start delivering education in a different way and assessments in a different way. We have to be prepared for how assessments are going to work next June. Next June, the Leaving Cert in Ireland is going to have to be prepared for this. And there's no excuse in a year's time to cancel something or whatever. They're going to need to have both prepared, the traditional paper-based way and the online digital way. And, with regards to investing, Warren Buffett says something about investing I think is kind of appropriate here in terms of this. It's only when the tide goes out when you find out who is swimming naked. And these business models, these universities, these assessments nobody saw COVID coming, but we're going to see the next virus coming, the next pandemic coming, or the phase two coming. And if we're still swimming naked in a year's time, we have a massive problem. So there's no excuse but to modernize what we're doing right now and have that ready for the next lot of assessments. I think there's a huge amount that needs to be done, but the new world looks quite different. I think it looks like there's a lot more happening from home, there's a lot more happening remotely, there's a lot more happening in a formative way as opposed to summative 3-hour exams. Security measures are going to have to change in terms of how we supervise these things. Things are going to have to change quite a bit. And the whole model of educating people for the next few years is going to change quite a bit. Living in cities, going to universities, going to big classes with 300 people in them and getting a lecture. That just has to change. And it'd be a very, very interesting time in education. I'm going to close one last thing. Was I listened to a earnings call on Microsoft recently, and they said that there had been 2 years of transition to digital in 2 months. And that's what's happening here. It's an accelerant to what was inevitable in digitalization of education. It's a transition to online that was going to happen anyway. It's going to take much longer, and now just has to happen, and has to happen right now.
Thank you, Gavin. Really, really interesting, the acceleration. And I think looking at it from these two universities, Yvonne, not to go into the future, but how are you seeing this acceleration happening from your perspective?
I see that we have to change many things, and we have to change them fast. I agree with what Gavin said about it is not about doing the same thing the same way as we did in the face-to-face mode, and now do it digitally. We have to change radically all things. And what Carlos Ivan said, it is like that. It is not just the thing of passing or failing students. It is more than that. We have to really make changes in what we assess and how we do it, because we need to address the new topics in education, like credentialing, digital badges, having shorter courses, designing own learning pathways, lifelong learning, personalized learning. I mean, all that is the discussion for post-COVID times. So assessment has to be ongoing, and formative, of course, but new assessments will be used more frequently. Self-assessment and peer assessment. Why? Because the process will belongs to the student, the learner, not the teacher. So self-assessment will gain more relevance now. And skills and competency-based assessment will be more important than just knowledge. Knowledge is one thing, but if you don't know what to do with it, it doesn't matter that you have it, that you own it. So the big challenges will be to give the value to the evidence of learning and not the grade. So we have to get rid of that concept of grades, because a 5 doesn't say anything against a 2 or a 1. So the number doesn't say anything by itself, by themselves. It has to deal with what you can do with what you have learned. So flexibility, autonomy uh, come to the scenario in assessment. It has to be flexible. It is not more like Wednesday at 3 p.m., everybody has to be assessed and you will prove what you can do just that day and that time. No, it has to be flexible. Flexible on what to assess and when and how to be assessed. So assessment has to be changed from the way it is being done right now to a way that praises the achievements of the students and not to just punish failure, or to praise what the students' strengths are and not to punish the weaknesses and mistakes. So weaknesses and mistakes, they are just to show you what other things you have to learn to be better, but not to punish you. So the big thing that I think that I see coming is that we have to learn a lot from the gaming world. Imagine someone who is playing games. That person is engaged, motivated. They keep trying, they never give up. But look at this. This is very interesting. When someone who is playing a game cannot pass a level, what do? They go and look for information to learn. They go to internet, they look in YouTube for video tutorials to see how to kill that monster and how to go to the next level. We need that in education. We need to kill the monsters that we have in education that keep us from learning. So we need to look for the ways of really overcoming our difficulties and keep trying and keep moving to next level. We see other thing that is very interesting in the gaming world is that people exchange information. They look for peers and they look for people who really know how to pass to next level, and they ask them and they learn from them. We need that in education. We need peers talking and teaching each other, exchanging information, and looking for ways of seeking mastery, helping each other. So to sum up, what I see for post-COVID era is that we are going to use a lot of tech tools. And we are going to give the value that data has. We need data not only to help students identify their learning path, but for teachers and instructors to really know how to guide them and to do the planning according to those needs. Analytics, especially predictive analytics, will be so much used because we need to know beforehand who is going to have trouble, when and where to help them. So type of assessment will depends on purpose. It is not that summative is bad. The thing is that it is bad when you are using for the wrong purpose. So we will see diagnostic, summative, and formative assessment going on. Yeah, but it will depend on the purpose, because one it cannot be used for the purpose of the other one, and peer assessment and self-assessment will be very relevant. About grades, I guess that they are not going to be that much used, because what is worth is the evidence of learning, what you can do with what you have learned. So assessment should be flexible, adaptive, personalized, engaging, and rewarding. This is like the big learning from the gaming world. The process of assessment should reward you, not punish you. So it should show you what you have learned, how you have progressed, what you can do now that you couldn't do before. So it is not to punish what you cannot do. It is to praise what you can do now. And to sum up the three stages, I would say that we went from that stage of just awareness of the purpose of assessment during um, or before COVID to really understand the importance of assessment and the urgency to improve learning and having assessment as a way to help improving it. That is the stage that we're living now. And next level will be to have assessment as a real and impactful transformation in education. So for me, just like having some points of what Gavin and Carlos Ivan said, it is not just a thing of passing or failing or doing the same thing that we did before. It is about real transformation and using assessment to really enhance learning processes, to help students and not to punish and not to give grades. Grades, I mean, they don't value anything. A 10, if Carlos gets a 10 and Gavin gets a 5, can I say that Carlos is better than Gavin? We don't know. Let's wait until they go to work to see who is doing better. So assessment should help on that.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. So, Carlos, it's a final reflection on this last module. So, assessment is not an end in itself, it's a vehicle for educational improvement, and the value should drive not only what we choose to assess, but also how we do so. What is your perspective on this post-COVID stage?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Yvonne for my 10, but I don't deserve it. Definitely. Well, yeah, let me talk about very briefly about some of the reflections or lessons learned so far. I mean, we are in the midst of this. It's going to be very complicated in the next few months in Mexico and in many other countries, but some lessons have been learned so far that are important in order to address these issues that Yvonne and Gavin said. First of all, what Yvonne said, and I absolutely agree, but it has to do much with technology. It's mainly about organization, governance, incentives. It's the whole structure of the university. In order to achieve this ongoing assessment, the elimination of grades, which I agree, of course, it is, I mean, we need to think about the different organizational arrangements. We need to think about governance. We need to think about incentives. We need to think about hiring professors, how to pay professors, how to evaluate professors. And it's something that we need to do fast, but it's extremely difficult. We have learned three main lessons in the University of Guadalajara, and I'm speaking as a professor as well and as directive. One is that the very, very important value of face-to-face interaction, of collaboration, of spontaneous sociability, what usually happens in the campus. So the challenge is in this new normality, whenever we can go back with some specific measures, how to really, and how an assessment has to address this as well, how to really grasp, how to really focus, how to really increase this personal interactive experience in higher education. So it's something disruptive, but it's something disrupting, but observing the past, not the future. I mean, we used to take for granted this interaction, this collaboration, this debate, dialogue, but now that we don't have it, we really missed it. Our students missed it, our professors. We need to, when we go back to normal, we need to really take advantage of that interaction and change our tools for assessment in order to make it much more valuable. Second, we definitely need to think about the length of our programs. if something we learned about this is that they're unnecessarily long. There's a debate around the world on whether we need to really refocus and make programs shorter in order to reduce costs on one hand, but in the other, in order to focus on significant important learning outcomes. And third, and finally, is this new relationship, and I'm speaking from the perspective of macro universities again. Perhaps for smaller universities, this is not a problem, but for us, and for many macro universities, we need to rethink our relationship with our students. We sometimes see the student as a number, as a code, because we have many hundred thousands. So assessment has to be built in a way that personalized learning, but before we need to personalize the relationship with the students. The University of Guadalajara has an advantage in that regard vis-a-vis and other universities, because we have a decentralized system. We're break upon different campuses. That helps, but we need to refocus and to continue with this process of decentralization in order to be closer, emotionally closer, and really take care about our students individually. And technology, I mean, the challenge is how technology can serve that purpose of personalized education, personalized assessment, and personalized learning. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We have a few minutes. I'm gonna take a few of the questions and maybe try to get them together. So, Gavin, this probably is more for you. I'm gonna make two questions that came up, but the first one is: Can one say the use of assessment tools in these cases may be the result of the need to deploy engagement tools to motivate student learning in a purely online environment? And the second one is: interactive oral assessments seem to be promising, but how to do this on a massive scale? What would be your view on these two?
Look, I'll deal with the second one first. Oral assessments on a massive scale. It's actually where Learnosity started. We were working with a number of governments, the New South Wales government, and then we worked with the Irish government trying to put oral assessments online. And this was 2006-07, and we literally took old-fashioned mobile phones, the Nokia things, and you'd dial a number, you'd call up, you'd answer questions online. It would basically leave voicemails for a teacher who would then listen and give feedback. And obviously things have moved quite a long way since then. We now do a couple of million audio recordings per month, powering some big English language and some foreign language assessments. So how do you move it online? There's two things. Like, there's stuff that's under the heading of asynchronous, as in you record and somebody grades it later on. And there's some things that are under the heading of synchronous, where there's some sort of live conversation recorded and then maybe graded by a teacher or whatever. So I think there's huge opportunities there. The technology is there. Zoom and the like is there and can be recorded, and that gets a whole conversation. Maybe even gets video as well as audio, and you record that. And technologies like that are there. That's for synchronous stuff. And for asynchronous things, you can play prompts, like play a video, wait 3 seconds with a counter, start recording, stop recording when there's 2 seconds of silence, move on to the next question, and so on. So there's a bunch of things you can do there. There's a bunch of ways we can move oral assessments online. And actually, it's a shame that it hasn't been done online. And frankly, I think doing it online can be much, much more efficient than it would have been otherwise. So instead of having people line up outside an office or whatever to do an oral assessment, you can schedule Zoom calls at certain times of day, and people do it online, do a lot more speaking. And it's the best way. I always said that the best way of learning a foreign language was to get a girlfriend who speaks that language, and then you definitely learn it. But short of that, it's speaking, right? It's speaking all the time. That's the best way of doing it. I did French for 5 years in school. I did Irish for 12 years in school. I don't speak either of them, but I drove around South America in a Volkswagen combi van and had to speak Spanish to get food, to get directions, to do whatever. And I learned more Spanish in 2 or 3 months than I learned Irish in 12 years. So that's the oral piece. Can one say that the use of assessment tools in these cases may result of the need to deploy engagement tools to motivate student learning in a purely online environment? Look, I don't know. I think there's lots of things. There's lots of things at play here. Certainly, you've got more motivated students and more students who are naturally doing things online, and assessment is a way of doing that. It's not the golden bullet either. It's lots and lots of things are going to change now in digital learning in this COVID era. One of them being assessment. There's a lot more.
Thank you so much, Gavin. We are reaching the end of the time. We have a few more questions. So what I think we should do is that we will post them together with the recording in our blog at EDT Partners. And probably for the sake of time, I want to thank Ivonne Gonzalez from Universidad La Sabana in Colombia, Carlos Iván Moreno from Universidad Guadalajara in Mexico, Gavin Cooney from Learnosity. I think this discussion has been really, really rich in terms of perspective. So I thank you for being available for that. Hopefully the audience has enjoyed it as we did. And well, sometimes it takes a challenge to bring the best of us. And I think there's many, many questions and many decisions that we need to take moving forward. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for the audience being engaged. So Gavin from Ireland, I think your examples on the naked swimming and the girlfriend are going to stick, but hopefully we get some more discussion. Thank you all, and stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Good afternoon.